But I want to move and just broaden our horizons a little bit and get international. And as you know, Professor Robert Patman is the person who keeps us up to date and gives us some perspective on what is going on in the world. And a lot has gone on in the world while we've been away at the beach, suffering the global change heat wave of 27 degrees. Robert, nice to see you again. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Sean. Good to see you.
All right. Boy, it's been busy. Look, I want to start actually with the issue and the conflict I know least about. I had never heard of Houthis before, or only in very broad terms. Who are these guys, these pirates, the Houthis? Where are they based and what are they doing?
Well, the Houthis there's been a civil war in Yemen for a number of years, going back to 2015.
Yeah.
And Saudi Arabia intervened in Yemen, backed by the United States. The rebel force was backed in Yemen. So the Houthis were party to the civil war. They were backed by Iran. And they continue to be backed by Iran. So Houthis have their own agenda for Yemen.
Are they a religious group or a defined group? Is Houthi a type of religion or what?
I think it's more based on ethnicity.
Right,
and,
okay.
Yemen has these divisions within it. But essentially, the Houthis' attacks on commercial civil shipping has been, if you like, a response to the continued escalation of the conflict in Gaza. With this conflict going on, we have to expect, and this has always been a possibility from the beginning, that outside actors would get involved in some shape or form.
So the Houthis are using the conflict in Gaza as a justification for their piracy?
They see... let's be quite clear, the situation in Gaza is an international disgrace and a humanitarian catastrophe. Nearly 24,000 people are now dead.
Yeah.
And more than 10,500 children are killed. Where do
those figures come from, Robert?
Those figures are from the UN and the UN agencies.
Okay.
And you only satellites show that close to 60% of residential buildings have been destroyed. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying the Houthis' action is right. I'm saying that they are reacting to a widespread sense that the UN Security Council is impotent and can't do anything, and they want to, let's be quite clear, there's a number of actors in the region, including Iran, who are happy to capitalize on the plight of the Palestinians for their own political reasons.
Right. Okay, so the Houthis, now I know who they are, and there seems to be, some international countries, Britain, New Zealand seems to have put itself in with this loose alliance. The United States clearly are prepared to take military action against the Houthis to, they say, protect the shipping? Protect the shipping lanes?
Just come back to the New Zealand position for a second, Sean. I don't quite understand the New Zealand position at the moment. Mm-hmm. The reason I say that is that we twice voted for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire or truce.
Yeah.
We voted on the 27th of October in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
We were the only one of the Five Eyes to do that. Secondly, on the 13th of December, we were then joined by Australia and Canada, other members of the Five Eyes, which also demanded an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
Yeah.
We subsequently have agreed to support airstrikes by the country which vetoed the resolution or opposed the resolution that the General Assembly were calling for.
Being the US.
So, yes. So
but
we're in a position...
airstrikes not against Yemen, but, against the Houthis. It's a separate incident.
It's separate, but it's related because one of the causes of escalation in the Middle East is the ongoing conflict in Gaza.
Yeah, but that would stop, of course, if all the hostages were released and they gave up the people who took the hostages.
Well, it wouldn't. Well, it would in one sense, yes.
Well, it would. It would, Robert.
There's a problem here. We've discussed it before. It's not hostages and the taking of hostages. The terrorist incident are part of a deeper, widespread confrontation between the Israelis and the Palestinians gone back decades.
Yeah.
The Hamas have got their leverage within the Palestinian community to some degree because, as Mr. Netanyahu put it, he took some pride in denying them a state. And the lack of political self-determination, ultimately, as a former US president pointed out, in fact, a late US president pointed out, John F. Kennedy, if a country or nation is denied the path for self-determination, you can expect violence and extremism to follow.
Yeah.
And to some extent, this is what's happening.
Yeah. Meantime, we have South Africa, which increasingly to me, Robert, looks like a kind of client state of the Soviet Union, or is certainly aligned towards the Soviet Union, has gone to the International Court of Justice claiming a genocide by Israel. I've watched some of the pleadings, some of the evidence presented on both sides of that case. Is that anything more than a bit of PR puffery? Were the charges against Israel to be proven? What happens? What would the consequences be? And also, what are the consequences if they aren't proven?
Well, first of all, even if the ICJ, which is the top legal court, and that's why the Israeli government is taking this charge pretty seriously and had their best legal brains in the country, presenting on their behalf in The Hague, the ICJ, despite its eminent stature, does not have the capacity to enforce its judgment or its rulings.
Yeah.
And the United States, for example, ignored a ruling. I think it was 1986 on Nicaragua. So it's quite possible that the ICJ may reach a ruling which will be ignored, but it could have consequences. And it could unsettle a number of countries which have hitherto been quite firm in their support. One of the things we have to be clear on, Sean, it's very difficult to prove the intent of genocide. There's been a number of statements made by representatives of the Israeli government. For example, the Israeli president said there were no innocent Palestinians, and the defense minister of Israel at one stage described the Palestinians as subhuman animals, etc. But
that proves racism or discrimination, not genocide.
Yeah, I mean, it may be rhetoric, as the Israelis claim, at an emotive time. I don't want to get into that. What I would say is quite clear, without going down the genocide route, that war crimes and the lack of respect for humanitarian law has been, first of all, was quite clearly demonstrated by Hamas and quite clearly demonstrated by Israel in its overwhelming and disproportionate response. And that is a worry. For give you an example, just cutting off all food, fuel, and electricity to a densely populated area on the evening of the 7th of October, to a population of 2.3 million, was always going to have severe consequences. Now, close to 1 million Palestinians are facing starvation.
Yeah.
So there's lots of. I think the big problem was, to be quite frank, that the United States dropped the ball.